And for the speakers, I'm gonna pin you all, so when we speak, then we can have, and I'll pin myself. Okay, so we are recording this just because as a resource, but I won't have the version where the students are seen. We'll just have this version. So in terms of privacy, you guys don't have to worry. So, but if you can have your video on for the sake of the panelists to be able to see you, that's great. And if it's too much on your bandwidth, don't worry too much about it. So welcome again. I'm Sophia. I'm the director of the Science Learning Institute. I know many of you, and thank you for joining us. This is the maybe 6th in our diversity in tech series, where we bring on speakers to talk about different issues related to diversity issues in tech and the tech industry. So today's topic is tech for social good. But before we get into that, if people in the chat box could just type in, oops, oh, here's Francis, great. Your name, your major, your pronouns, and why you are interested in today's topic, just so our speakers know a little bit more about you. So in the chat box, your name, what you're studying, your major. Hi, Francis, welcome.
Hello.
I'm gonna pin your video just so we have you all. So we're just doing some introductions from the students to put in their name, pronouns, major, and why you were interested in today's topic. So if you could drop that in the chat box, I'll give a few minutes for you to figure that out. And you don't have to write a very long explanation. You can just write a sentence. Well, actually, and maybe we can have the guest speakers just do a quick intro that way, and then we'll do a more thorough introduction when we get to the panel part. So name, pronoun, major, maybe, yeah, share what you majored in college, and then why you're interested in today's topic.
You want us to do it too?
Sure, that'd be great.
Okay.
Thanks. Hi, Sabir. Oops.
Yeah.
Not this one yet. Don't pay attention to that link I just did.
Yeah.
So Sabir, can you use the chat box on your phone?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, just look at the prompt that I put in the chat and introduce yourself. We'll take another minute for everybody to put something in the chat box. Okay, I'll keep going, but if the students, if you all can keep putting your information in the chat just so the speakers know who you are, that would be great. So again, welcome, Diversity in Tech. We're talking about tech for social good today. So I have the link that I just put in the chat, if you could go to that. And what I'm asking you to comment on is, what do you think about when you think about technology? And you'll have a chance to put in a couple responses. So the speakers, you can go to that link as well. And I'm going to show a word cloud that shows us what that answer is. So if you can, everybody just put in your answer. And then once enough answers come in, then I'll share the word cloud that is forming. So what do you think about when you think about technology? What are the words that come to mind? What are the concepts that come to mind? Anything that just comes to your mind. Don't worry about filtering yourself, just write what words come to your mind. And here's the link again. You can use that link to just type in any words that come to your mind. Okay, take another 10 seconds, add any words that come to your mind. Okay, so this is a word cloud that shows the various responses that came up in everybody's words. Sometimes when the same people put in the same words, then certain words get bigger, like it kind of shows you how many people used that response. But it looks like lots of different words have come up. Computers, obviously, everywhere. Capitalism, artificial intelligence, gentrification. I thought this was interesting. Overlords, startups, efficiency. So definitely lots of things come to mind when we think about technology. And at least we look in some of these, there's things related to social issues like gentrification or innovation, unity, future, lots of things that have to do with how we live our lives and not just the technology itself. So today's topic is really to think about and have us talk with our guests on how is technology being used, not just as a way to get out information or to get out actual, like literally hardware technology, but are there ways that people are using technology and their platform in a job in a tech space to advance social causes or to advance a social mission? So I want to show this really short video clip and just to get us thinking a little bit more about this. And yeah, it's just like a minute and a half.
Technology can be used to bring people together across continents for positive social change.
Technology can be used to help people document police misconduct that they have observed or experienced.
Technology can be used to bridge the gap of underrepresented communities to the world at large, to be at the forefront of innovation, social change, and really shedding light on the truths that matter.
Technology can be used to expand people's horizons, their awareness of lived experiences, and from there, they can build their capacity for radical empathy.
Technology can be used to close gaps and open doors.
Technology can be used to protect our rights.
Technology can be used to help people find affordable housing.
Technology can be used to connect people with intellectual and developmental disabilities to a world that they should know.
Technology can be used to reduce bias in recruitment so that women and minorities have greater access to jobs.
Technology can be used to inspire a community.
I believe technology can be used for social change.
I believe technology can be used for social change.
I believe technology can be used for social change.
I believe technology can be used for social change.
I believe technology can be used for social change.
I believe technology can be used for social change.
So that just gives you a little bit of an idea of all the different ways technology can be used. And one of the reasons I thought it'd be useful to have guest speakers like this for today is I know a lot of you are going into or want to go into tech, whether as a software engineer or in some other kind of job. And there's ways to think about the kind of job that we have and just doing the job and that's it. And then there are other ways to think about how do you use that job in that company that you're in the environment that you're in to push for more than just what you're doing on the day-to-day, more beyond yourself. So our speakers today will hopefully shed some light on the possibilities of what you can do in a job in tech, that there are lots of different ways to get involved. So yeah, I think we'll get started with the panel. So I'm going to be asking some questions of the panelists, and then we'll have some time together like that. And then I wanted to have the space for you all to get into breakouts with somebody that you choose. And I'll send out a poll so you can choose your preferences. And then we'll have some time with each individual, and then we'll come back together as a big group. So that's the format of today. And hopefully that works for all of you. So since we have 3 wonderful speakers with us, I thought it'd be helpful just for you all to introduce yourselves, and maybe in the process of introducing like where you are, what you do as part of your work, is what got you on that journey. I noticed that at least 2 of you have majors in computer science. Jason, you don't, but it's interesting to think, you know, you're all in tech in different ways. So if you want to just share, a little bit about your path to get to where you are today, that would be great. So Jason, you want to start us off?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm Jason Serafika. I use they, them pronouns. I am an instructor at General Assembly's San Francisco campus, but I'm going to give you a quick tour with my backgrounds and how I got here. So I started off by going to free code camp study groups around San Francisco, like this. And that's where I learned how to code in many different places across the city. But over time, I started to volunteer and help organize meetups myself. And that's why I realized I have a knack for teaching people how to code. Even though I didn't major in computer science, I knew that the jobs of the future would need technical skills. So even though I majored in sociology at UC Davis, I tried to ask my friends who were majoring in computer science, what skills should I learn if I want to pursue a career in the tech industry? And how can I represent myself as a non-binary queer Filipino-American person in this industry? So over time, I kept organizing. Eventually, these meetups got bigger and bigger. So in 2019, I actually helped organize a hackathon with Free Code Camp with hundreds of participants. And now I got hired at General Assembly right before the pandemic. And that's just a little bit about me.
Great, thanks, Jason. And maybe just share where you're calling in from so people know where everybody is.
Oh, sure. I'm calling from my home in San Francisco. So I'm not actually in any of these places around all these people. So don't worry.
No social distancing issues there. Thanks, Jason. Marilenis, can you go next?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Switch. Yeah, so my name is Marilenis Lee. I was born and raised in Venezuela. I've been in the US for a little bit over 20 years. And I majored in computer science in Venezuela, and I also got a master's degree in computer science in Venezuela. And then I moved to the US to pursue a Master of Arts in digital media. So I got that here in Cal State East Bay. And that took me on my first job in the US. I worked professionally in Venezuela, but I also taught there at university when I was doing my master's. I was a TA, and then I became a professor for a couple of years. Then, I wanted something else than just the core of programming, operating systems and stuff. So my passion was computer graphics. So I leaned into digital design, digital media, and got my first job at Leapfrog coding games. So it was really fun. Leapfrog became really, really popular at some point, and we sold millions of copies of these books everywhere. It was just an amazing job to have, and it was really fun. Like, I really enjoy being around creative people. And then after that, I worked at Stanford University as an academic technologies specialist, which is sort of someone who bridges technology for teaching and learning. So I was creating they call them smart classrooms. You probably know them, with the big screens and stuff. So I was working on that, but I also had to help the professors use technology for teaching. So teaching them, learning, helping them with the tools and stuff. And after that, I went back into the creative mode, and I worked at a company called Great Schools, which they keep the surveys for school, like the rating for the schools in different areas and in the country. But I was working on producing the Spanish version of a program called College Bound, which was an online learning experience aimed to help low-income families take their kids to be successful in college. So that was kind of an educational platform. So parents knew what to do when the kids were like in kinder. How do I take them to be successful? So we launched that. And after that, I became again a teacher. I had my son, so I stayed at home with him, became a teacher and taught computer science in the Bay Area. And after that, took a small break, studied for interviews, and got into Google. So that's, it's been kind of a back and forth between education and industry. But when I volunteer, my passion is using education to help people learn computer science and take it to their next level.
Cool. It's nice. It's interesting to hear. And we've had lots of guest speakers this whole year talk about that often the path with a computer science degree or in tech is not a straight line. Like there's lots of different ways to get in and then ways to get out and then back and forth. And it sounds like you've had that, which I think is a really good thing for the students, for you all to remember is, number one, career paths are never straight, that they are often very like windy, unless you say become a doctor and it's a very straight path. But often other kinds of industries are not so straight. And then, yeah, there's ways to go in and out. And it'll be good to hear a little bit more about that when we continue with the panel. So thanks, Marilenis. Hi, Francis. Do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Francis. I'm a software engineer specializing in UI development on the customer acquisition team at Slack. So I work on primarily front-end marketing campaigns over there. I've been working professionally as a developer since 2015. I have a bachelor's in computer science from Hampton University in Virginia, which is where I was born and raised. And I have a master's in computer science from Cornell Tech. Outside of Slack, I volunteer as the technology director and an advisor for Tequeria, which is a 501c3 nonprofit that serves the largest professional community of Latinx in tech globally. In terms of how I got into technology, I really didn't know computer science or working in tech was a thing until my senior year of high school. And before that, I had primarily been interested in the medical field. I really like to dissect stuff. So, you know, that typical biology class you had in high school where they told you to dissect a frog. I was the complete opposite of the person who was like, I cannot do this. I asked for another frog after I finished dissecting my first one. So I was really interested in that. I think it's still a lot of fun. But then I did this medical mission as a volunteer in Vietnam for Operation Smile, which I don't know if you've seen their ads, but they do the cleft lip, cleft palate surgeries for free to kids who need it across the world. And a lot of that is medical focused. And so I was a volunteer. And after that, I quickly learned that the medical profession is not for me. And I pivoted to the only other thing that was really of interest at the time, like in my childhood, which was computer games. My dad is a math professor. He immigrated here from Peru when he was really young. He got a scholarship. He was one of the first Peruvian kids to get a scholarship to study here in the US. And he really felt like growing up that all his kids needed to learn math and science. And he was also a little bit into computers. And so he was like, okay, I'm gonna buy all these games and y'all are gonna play them. And so we did, and I really enjoyed it. And I started just playing computer games on my own outside of the games that he gave me because they were all educational. And that was pretty much the only thing besides like biology and medical stuff that I enjoyed. So I looked more into that. I started studying on my own, just taking free online classes. I got rejected by every school I applied to study computer science because I had absolutely no experience from prior. But I was eventually admitted to school to study computer science, and kind of the rest is history, right? So I will say, like now where I work at Slack, nobody on my team has a computer science degree except me. So it's definitely not a necessity. And I'm not saying that every engineer at Slack doesn't have a CS degree, because plenty do. But just like even on my team, not anyone except myself does. So it's not a requirement to major in the specific field in order to be successful in it. And yeah, that's kind of my story in a nutshell. So happy to be here.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. I love that all of you have such different ways that you got to this. So this is why I love these panels that we've been hosting. So I think some of you touched on this a little bit, like how your identities, however you kind of pick those, whether it's your gender, your race, your ethnicity, sexual orientation, any of those things. If you could each talk about what identities have mattered the most to you or been most like evident to you as you have taken your journeys and in your career path, and just share a little bit about how those identities have affected your path, whether for good, for challenge, success, whatever it might be. Yeah, does anybody want to start off with that?
I think I can talk a little bit about it.
Sure.
So growing up in the Bay Area, I was always aware that there was a large Filipino American community, but I felt that was not reflected in a lot of the tech industry. Like I would go to meetups and I would often be like a person of color and a sea of other people. Even when I went to queer focused meetups, I felt like, oh my gosh, am I like the only queer person of color at this place? And I noticed like, even when I was going for like, when I was looking into like software engineering, I was like, okay, how do I see myself on this team if I'm going to be the one that sticks out? And that's what really helped me when I went back to my free code camp meetups. I thought about how can I make it more accessible to the communities that already call this area home. So we started, so at the time, free code camp was meeting in the Mission at a hackerspace called Noisebridge. You might have seen me use this background. So we started having our meetups more regularly in these areas that are more accessible to public transit. And we wanted to figure out like, what else can we use from the free code camp curriculum to teach these skills in this area.
Cool. Do you feel like, Jason, as you've kind of been in the field more and definitely, you know, like with the large community that you've been building, do you feel like there is more of a presence or a noticeable presence of queer folks of color in industry, or is it still like a tiny minority?
So since I've started teaching at General Assembly, I've noticed that the student body is slowly becoming more diverse, which makes me very happy, especially with the pandemic. The American workforce really needs to reskill into these technical skills, and I'm really happy to be part of that. So I'm happy to see a lot of my students coming from more diverse backgrounds, from all kinds of professions that I wouldn't even know that had skills that transfer a lot into tech, like professional musicians. One was also an entrepreneur in the beauty space. I could go on and on about these stories, but I really felt like representing who I am was important for me in this journey.
Mm-hmm. And have you gotten positive feedback from folks who are like, oh, I mean, like when you said you were in those spaces and nobody looked like you or nobody kind of had similar identities, do you feel like you've gotten positive feedback from folks who are experiencing similar things?
For the most part, yes. Sometimes when I introduce my pronouns, I get like a roll of the eyes or even say like, oh, I identify as an attack helicopter. Yeah, so sometimes that happens, but that's like a 2% thing.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, like I do have to like come out or be out just to see like, is this place going to be right for me? Even when I was trying to learn programming on my own in college, there were a few like diversity focused workshops in the computer science club at UC Davis, but I still felt like, okay, like there's this workshop, I'm attending it, but I'm not a computer science major. Am I in the right place? And that was another part of me that I had to figure out, is that I'm a mostly self-taught developer at this point. Is this the right place for me? And that's the question that I kept asking myself over and over as I tried to like find work in this industry.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a little bit about imposter syndrome and like, will you ever feel like you belong? And for a lot of, you know, for a lot of the students here who are potentially from underrepresented groups, I think it's that idea, like, if you don't feel like you belong, do you leave that space? Do you try to make a space for yourself and just say, forget you, I'm gonna fit in the ways that I can? Those are all things I think that are helpful to think about. And for the students, if you all are thinking about that and already feel like you're in your CS classes and you're like, do I belong here? You know, there's gonna be a constant journey around that, I think. Yeah. Marilenis or Francis, when do you want to go next?
Yes, I can talk. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, it's fine. Go ahead.
For me, it was a little bit difficult because I was coming from Venezuela, and so in like I grew up in my country with my people, and I'm gonna say that racism, it's not a thing there, like, or the different things I've seen in the Bay Area or in the US with woman, and if you're a woman, then you're not equal maybe, and if you're a person of color, you're not, and if you're this and that. So to me, I had to learn all these things, right? And then at some point I was like, well, so where do I fit in, right? Because I could have been, at points, I was being segregated or you know, treated differently because I was Latina, but I wasn't aware of it. And it clicked when I married my husband, who is American, and I will tell him, oh, this happened today. Like, the police stopped me at downtown San Jose, and I wasn't even driving that fast. I don't know why they stopped me. And my husband will be like, that's racial profiling. You're driving like I was driving an old Toyota car. I was pregnant and I was going to a yoga class, and they stopped me. I was like, weird. So kind of slowly, I was like, oh yeah, it's real, right? I think in a way it could have been better for me to be in the unknown than to learn all these things, but you know, it's like the growing pains, right? So I learned slowly, and I think for me, I kind of got confused because I didn't know where I belonged. So when I was teaching, I will be more like empowered to help the Latinas that were sitting in my classroom, because I will usually have one or two girls, and mostly one of them will be Latina. So, and I will see them being shy and, you know, like kind of hiding in the background, because there were like one or two ladies, two girls in amongst 18 men in a computer science class. So I will literally just try to focus more on bringing them up. Yeah, so that was kind of like, and that made me feel good, right? I'm doing something good for them. I also volunteer a lot with different nonprofits. Whenever I saw an opportunity to teach Latinos, I will do that, because that was my people, right? I identify with them. I can speak Spanish to them, and I know I can do it. I can help them. So I would just lean towards that and do it. And I still do that. So luckily for me, I reunited with some friends from Venezuela that went to college with me. And one of my friends, she's a executive at Google, and she started mentoring me when we got together to have a drink. Like, she will be like, hey, you can get a job at Google. I'm like, there's no way. And that's where the imposter syndrome kicks in, right? There's no way I'll ever go. What would I do there? What do you guys do? And it took about 3 years for me to accept the fact that I could interview at Google. so I did. I didn't pass the interview the first time, and then I became a temp. So I started as a temp. Now I'm a vendor, and I'm working my way to interview again as a full-timer, because luckily for me, again, I have found mentors within Google that are women, that are Latina, that have kids. They're successful, so I can see myself there, right? Before I wouldn't, there was no way for me because I didn't know anyone, only my friends. So she started talking to me about it and telling me about her team, how diverse it was, and blah, blah, blah. And that's how I became interested and finally made the leap to join. And that's why it's so important to see other people succeed, that other people that look like you, so you can see yourself in there.
Yeah, that's interesting to hear. I mean, I often think of Google and I don't think of diversity at all.
Right.
So it's great to hear
Right.
there are Latinas in those positions, and then that there is this effort to kind of bring up everybody, you know, who's similar, has similar backgrounds, and that's so important. And that idea of mentoring, I think, is something we've heard often, is figuring out, finding a mentor who can help you navigate those systems that can often seem really like you said, unattainable, or like, why would I even consider applying to Google? How the heck could I ever, even though you have a master's in computer science, right? It's not like you're unqualified, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
it's just a personal thing. It's that identification. Do you identify with that system or not? And once you join, then it becomes more ingrained, like, oh yeah, this is a good company. I like the people, they're kind, they're nice, they want me to succeed. So it's more of an invitation. And I'm not saying that happens all the time. It might not happen. I know people that they just leave, they go like, forget it, I can't do anything in here. But also you have to be flexible and open to the opportunities.
Yep. Yeah, thank you. Frances, what about you? Your thoughts on how identities and have shaped your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think to put it into an analogy, like, you're not really going to think about your identity if you are a whale in a sea of other whales. It's not something that's going to come up. You're going to be like, oh, you know, I'm going to focus on other things. But if you're a whale in a sea of sharks, you're going to question why you're there, and you may feel some imposter syndrome, and you may question why you're in the sea with other sharks instead of other whales, or where there's more whales. So I think, like, for me, I didn't really think about my identity and how it would be a disadvantage or advantage until I got into the workforce, and I started, and also before when I started studying, because at that point, up until then, you know, my high school, elementary school, middle school, it was pretty diverse, you know. But once I got into studying, I was pretty much the only female Latinx person in my classes and in the workforce. It wasn't until I got my role at Slack that I even worked directly with another person of the same background as myself, and then got exposed to like people who were in management or higher positions. And when you look at the VP level and above in the tech industry, you don't see anybody who looks like me at those levels. So I definitely think that sort of thing, you know, when you look at it, it definitely did affect me to the point where I kind of question it, because there was definitely one point where I was applying to jobs after I had gotten my master's, and I felt like, you know, I had the credentials, I was being set up for success, I had relevant work experience. Why aren't these companies hiring me? And I got to the final stage of so many different companies, and there was this one company where I pretty much felt like I just completely powered through the interview, you know, like I did amazing. And come to find out, it was me and this other person, and this other person was a white guy. And I found out his like profile. They shared it with me. They were like, you know, this guy aligns more with what we're looking for. And he had less experience. He had less education credentials or whatever. And so then I was like, okay, maybe there's this larger story here. So I do think that there is still discrimination in the workplace for sure. I try not to let that affect me, because if I did, I don't think I would be as successful as I am today. But it is really important, especially given that, you know, the anniversary of George Floyd was like 3 days ago, and that there was this whole Black Lives Matter movement and this just moment of reckoning for this country when it comes to race, that we can't ignore it. And with my work with Tequeria, which is a nonprofit organization for Latinx professionals in tech, that intersection of the Latino population and the tech industry is really interesting because, you know, obviously historically, Black and Latinx people have been vastly underrepresented in tech, but tech is the sort of industry that we're all extremely dependent on during this pandemic that has, you know, completely thrived in this environment and is one of the largest wealth generating industries in the world. So if you look at the statistics and forgetting all about the social values and like just the sort of kumbaya-ness of having everything be equal, just looking at the numbers, if we look at the numbers, Latinos are projected to be 1/3 of the US population. They're already the largest non-white voting group and ethnic minority, but they're represented in the single digits within tech. So that's just like a lot of money being left behind in the country, given that we are the largest tech market in the world and the largest generator. So yeah, it's interesting. I think for me personally, like going back to the original question, like with identity, I'm sort of a double minority, right? Like I am a female and I'm also a person of color because I'm Latinx. And so that's like a double whammy in the tech industry, or really in any industry, maybe I would argue, because you have like two things kind of working against you. But to be honest, I've never really seen it that way until it was really put in my face. And I would encourage folks to not let any part of your identity be a deterrent to wanting to achieve whatever it is you want to achieve, because that's just silly. And there are communities out there that are willing to support you in different ways, regardless of what your identity is. So,
yeah, definitely. Definitely appreciate that. And I think I like your analogy of the whale shark thing. Like, I'm curious, you know, how many of the students here, you're in computer science classes for many of you, or even math classes, and how do you feel about whether you're a whale or in the sea of whales or a whale in the sea of sharks, and how are you building up your own like ability to stick it out when it doesn't feel like you're in an environment that you see others like yourself. So yeah, definitely lots that resonates with me for sure. Maybe we can stick with you a little bit, Francis, because you've talked about your work with Tequeria, and just maybe we can move into this part of like, what are you all doing in your job currently, volunteering, whatever those spaces are to, you know, push for change in areas that you care about. And it sounds like, Francis, with the work of Tequeria, there's some of that there. So can you tell us a little bit more about that work and how you got involved in it, and what are some of the initiatives that y'all are involved with?
Yeah, sure. So Tequeria, essentially our mission statement is to provide resources and support for Latinx professionals in tech. The way we do that is primarily through community. A lot of the people who are in our community, which is about 15,000 plus members and allies, are usually the only person who identifies Latinx in their workplace or in their school or what have you. And you know, loneliness breeds isolation and isolation breeds insecurity. So it is a feeling a lot of members can relate to within tech, but within this fantastic community, you find people that are willing to elevate you. They'll give you referrals to jobs. They'll review your resume. They'll share resources with you that are relevant to pair programming or data structure and algorithms, whatever it is you need to kind of prepare yourself for that interview process. They're basically giving you insider information, because that's kind of the point of the professional organization, is to give you a leg up, to try and up level you. And our vision is really to create more leaders within the tech industry, because at the end of the day, those are the folks that are going to be able to enact change and sort of pay it forward to the community. So I first got involved with that organization back in 2017. Up until that point, I hadn't really connected with that part of my identity, because frankly, like there's not a lot of Latinx people in Virginia. And so when I moved to California for work, that's when I started connecting more with that identity and just kind of embracing it more. And so, yeah, I think overall that type of work has been really fulfilling. It is a way that I feel like I'm enacting change outside of my full-time work that feels really meaningful to me. So yeah, I can talk more about it, but yeah, I don't want to take up too much space.
Well, maybe one just some additional question for you, and then when we're done with you, if you could put the link, any links related to Techity in the chat, that'd be great. Do you
Okay.
feel like you've had to kind of keep that separate then from your work? Like, is there anything you're doing at Slack in your job, in your role, where you're also trying to push for change, or is it just too hard? Like, and not to say that you've given up, but like, where do you find the balance of the outside of workspace to do that kind of stuff and then the inside of workspace?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question. It's a really good one. I'll be frank. I think early on in my career, I didn't look into those kinds of opportunities because I was just trying to hustle and focus on getting paid. I don't come from like the wealthiest family. And I think being able to focus on social good is actually in and of itself kind of a privilege, right? So if you're looking to like just support your family, it's not something you can focus on until you're in a more like financially stable condition. So it wasn't until later on that I really started volunteering a lot of my time into all these different initiatives. And I will say, like with my work, so this is part of the reason why I'm at Slack even after 3 years, because as you get into the tech industry and you earn more experience, companies are going to be like begging you to work for them. Even if you just have like just 1 year of full-time experience as a software engineer, you're already like in a better position than a lot of other candidates. And so people are always trying to recruit you. And that's why the average tenure for a software engineer is like a few years. So I'm still at Slack, not because of, you know, there's like a loss of other opportunities, but because I genuinely like working there. And part of the reason I like working there is because they actually, like part of it is because they have a focus on social good. So one of my coworkers, his name is Sumit, and he used to be incarcerated in San Quentin in California. And Slack and other companies that Slack has, you know, worked really hard to put this program in, have this program now called the Next Chapter, and it essentially trains folks who are currently incarcerated, training them to learn computer science fundamentals, learn how to program, so that they can then join as a full-time engineer at one of these like great tech companies. And all of that is completely paid for. And so Slack hired, I believe, like 5 folks 2 years ago. They're all full-time now. Sumit is a newer graduate of the program, and now he's like one of my coworkers. And that's the kind of work that I think is like, okay, this is really great. And so with that, I actually volunteer to help interview the candidates who were selected and give them resume advice and interview advice. So I had to tell them, like, you know, based on how they answered the interview question, okay, this is like really great how you talked about this, but maybe show more emotion in how you're talking about this story, or show more genuineness or what have you. And so that's kind of a way I've directly sort of interacted with social good initiatives within Slack. They also encourage us to like take volunteer time off, or VTO, which is a common theme actually within tech companies now. I think a lot of them are trying to get better at it, but then you can see like in the news, there's still like some companies that, you know, are kind of troubling in what they're doing. But yeah, again, at the end of the day, like sometimes, unfortunately, you have to like work your way up in order to be able to be in a position where you can give back, honestly. So that's something to think about as well.
Yeah, that's super helpful. I feel like some of the takeaways is like, yeah, staying at a company for a while, you need some of that like ranking kind of thing. But also it sounds like keeping an eye out for companies that do good, right? Like Slack is known for they've got like that Slack for good kind of like arm of their work. And I think when folks are doing research, I mean, obviously for your first job, you're probably not going to be like, okay, I need to find this and this and this about a company, and I won't accept a job unless it's like doing good and gives me good pay. Maybe you can't be so picky early on, but that's something good to keep an eye out for, is if you care about these kinds of things, a good work environment, plus a company that's got some social responsibility. Those are all things you can do research on. And that's also where the network, I would assume, really matters to be able to network with people that work at all different kinds of companies, to hear like, this is a great place to work, or this is a terrible place to work if you're a person or a woman of color. So yeah, definitely lots of useful information there. Francis, thank you so much. Yeah, and thank you for those posts on there. Jason or Marilenis, does one of you want to go next and just kind of commenting and thinking about how you've pushed for social good in different ways, either directly in your job or outside of your job? Eeny, meeny, miny, moe.
I'll speak, Marilenis, if you don't mind.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, so outside work, in addition to Free Code San Francisco, I'm also on the leadership team for Out in Tech U, which is a mentorship program for LGBTQ young adults and university students who are interested in pursuing careers in tech. I've mentored a few times before joining the leadership team. So what I was increasingly finding is that people were doing these programs in the hopes of landing an internship at a big fancy tech company. But sometimes they get so disappointed because they would do the mentorship and not land the internship afterwards. So that's why one of the things I want to do on the leadership team is help reframe it as an opportunity to learn technical skills, because I'm trying to open this up to anyone who wants to pursue a career in tech and not just like software engineering. There's just so many professions that are under the umbrella of tech, but a lot of them do require technical skills.
And how did you, oh, sorry, were you?
Oh, yeah.
I think there was a little bit of a lag. Keep going. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh yeah, and just for more context, so Out in Tech is a community of LGBTQ people who work in tech, and they have a large Slack space. Previously, they used to do like small meetups in a lot of major cities across the United States and possibly the United Kingdom. But that was something else that I found myself where I wanted to really give back to the community, because growing up queer is very difficult, especially during that time of my life. And I wanted to be like the cool, queer, badass person that I needed during that time. Plus, I'm learning like a lot because with General Assembly, I'm teaching people from all different kinds of ages and backgrounds. But it's helpful to also really challenge myself in teaching and trying to like teach these technical skills to an audience that might be busy with college, or have more limited resources than a lot of my students would at a coding boot camp.
Yeah, and if you could put some of those links into the chat too, Jason. I know I've come across General Assembly and find a lot of the free workshops really useful, and I've sent those to students of like, yeah, things related to internships, improving your resume, non-tech careers, and what that looks like. So for all of you to know, General Assembly is like a, would you consider yourself like a public education kind of nonprofit? Is it a nonprofit or is it a for-profit?
Not to my knowledge. I think General Assembly is a for-profit entity.
Okay.
But it is similar to a lot of the other coding boot camps as they're known. So I do have some students who use coding boot camps as kind of like a finishing school before they pursue developer positions. But in addition to General Assembly, I also teach coding through Free Code Camp San Francisco. And I'm also trying to lead this Out in Tech U youth mentorship program. So in general, I'm constantly trying to teach like thousands of people weekly. Like, this is the technical skills of the future that you will have to learn. So I'll be finding the links and putting them in the chat too.
Yeah, great. And I'm assuming Free Code Camp is free, right? That's why it's called free.
Yes, it's called Free Code Camp because it is a free and open source curriculum.
Cool.
But I'm putting in my links right now. There's also a few groups in the East Bay. But if you're interested in looking at the curriculum, since it is based off of what you would be learning in a coding boot camp, which is geared heavily towards like making full stack web applications.
Cool. Thank you for sharing all those. Yeah, and if you can share General Assembly's link too, that'd be great. So I think what I've noticed is General Assembly has both free workshops and then they have the paid for boot camps. So those are just things to look into. And if Jason's saying it's like using it as a finishing school after you get your CS degree, if you end up transferring, those are things to look at to build your skills. Thanks, Jason. Marilenis, what about you?
So mainly I've been taking opportunities at work when they engage with, it's called an hour of code. So Google organizes a lot of volunteers to go and teach at elementary schools. So I've done a few of those with Google. I've also done other programs where they bring students that are about to enter in college to teach them about computer science, so they get interested in pursuing that career. And recently, this is the last thing I did as a personal volunteer work. I joined Stanford. They have a program called Code in Place, which is sort of a community service. It started last year in 2020 in the middle of the pandemic. These 3 professors of computer science, it will be like the computer science 101 at Stanford. I think it's 1604, I can't remember the name, but these 3 professors, when the pandemic started, they felt really sad that they couldn't teach. So they opened up the class to the whole world, like anyone from anywhere in the world could take the class. So they escalated the program to be like, for this year, I don't know much about last year, but this year there were 10,000 students. They received about 30,000 applications. So they ended up accepting 10,000 students, and we were 2,000 teachers. They called us section leaders. So it was an amazing program. The amount of work they put into it, the professors, the staff, the volunteers, everyone was like, you know, you can imagine being in this type of initiative is really fulfilling. For me, it was a little bit of a stretch because I have my job and I have a younger child. My husband was also taking the class because I told him it could be a good thing for him to do, so he did. So it was like 5 weeks of, oh my God, and he's finishing up his final project. But all in all, it was just a beautiful thing to do, to be able to bring this type of knowledge to anyone. So for my section, I had 10 students. I had a cardiologist that was a Stanford grad. I had this other guy was like a business person. He was like a VP of a company. I had a blogger. I had a retiree who wanted to learn coding, among different people, right? So it was just like an amazing thing. And I'm looking forward to maybe doing it next year. But with the pandemic, I haven't been able to do last year I didn't do much with Google because of the hour of code didn't happen. It probably happened online and I didn't realize it. But yeah, I think in my case, I lean towards more education and finding those opportunities where I can help other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think Jason mentioned this, but I truly believe the future is you're going to need to know tech just as much as you need to know math and how to read and write. I mean, programming, computer science is going to be one of those literacies we just all need to have. And I've never taken computer science class. I actually signed up for that Code in Place class last year.
Oh,
and I got rejected. So I know there were like 15,000 students that got accepted or something ridiculous out of the many thousands that applied. Marilenis, if you could put the link for that program in the chat, that would be great, because I think that's something good for students to know. If you're looking for some outside resources, that's another free potential if they do it again next year. I also just put into the chat, as people are kind of taking in all of this, we're going to go to breakouts in about a minute and fill out the survey for your preferences of who you'd like to talk with. So Jason will have a breakout, Marilenis will have one, and Francis will have one. And I'll put you based on hopefully as close to your preferences as possible. So as you're filling that out for the students, yeah, I think each of you has such interesting ways you've been able to not just do your job. And I think that's one of those pieces where it's not just about doing your job, but I mean, many people do that and that's fine. But if you have a desire to contribute in some other way, then I think that's always one way to go. So thank you for sharing those. Let's see, I've got some students saying that they need to go. So Hyunsuk, yep, thank you for coming. Sabir, if you can't stay, then that is your choice. So I will let you make the choice that you can. For the others, hopefully you can stick around. For the tech core, I am hoping that you will stick around for sure. And yeah, if people have questions and want to start to put them in the chat box, you can do that. Let me see as we get responses in, if everybody could put in your choices. And if you don't put in a choice, I will just put you somewhere, but hopefully you all have a choice. So I'll just ask for everybody's patience as I get this figured out. Okay. I think people get afraid of the breakout space, you know what I mean? Okay. So I'm waiting for no, Drake, you did. Omer and China, can you all make a selection?
Oh, I turned it in.
Did you? Oh, there you are. Okay, sorry. Okay. Okay, so it's two of you in each of the rooms, and what I'm going to do in the chat box is just put a few questions that can hopefully guide some of the discussion. I'll put you in there for about 10, maybe 15 minutes. So and this is meant to be a little bit of a discussion between the speaker and the students. So for the speaker, if you can kind of facilitate, maybe just check in and ask a little bit more about them, introduce themselves, why they're interested in computer science and tech, and then what are their thoughts about using tech for social good. I know we haven't really talked about this much as a group, but if there's just some thoughts that people are starting to have, and then definitely time for questions and answers. So I know our group can be a little bit on the quieter side, so if you could be patient with them. And for the students, if you could use this opportunity to, pick these people's brains. They're all in tech in various ways. So I will send you to the rooms, and then I'll kind of stop in just to check in and see how things are going. Okay, go to it. Sabrina and Drake, are you okay? Oh, Sabrina? Sabrina, are you there? Okay, I'm just going to finish up the recording. So I hope you all got a chance to chat and gain some additional insight from our guests today. Maybe what we could do, well, let's just hear what each group talked about a little bit. So Marilenis's group, what are some of the things that came up in your all's discussion?
We were talking about how they, why they got into computer science. Anna was saying that she had explored another career before, and she was interested in computer science even before she started the other career. So that's nice to hear. And Drake said he took a Python class and he really liked it. And so he hopes to, both of them are hoping to transfer into a college, university.
Yeah.
And we also talked about internships and about mentors and about reaching out to other people once they get the ball rolling into what they want to do and learn different areas, maybe taking some of the free code camp classes. All that can be beneficial for them.
Great. Jason, what about your group? What are some things y'all talked about?
So Omer and Sabrina, we had some very interesting conversations. Do you want to share?
I don't have any problem. You can share.
Sabrina, what about you? Do you want to share?
Oh, sorry, sure. Yeah, first we went over the 3 questions that Sophia had, and then we started talking about more about technology, and then sorry, I was like, I'm trying to remember like a lot of the topics that we went over. It was a lot. So we went over like how technology is improving, and like I think Jason went over how he had like an internship and there wasn't anyone. He only talked to like an AI, or there wasn't anyone there. There was no feedback, which is interesting.
Yeah.
It was interesting.
Yeah, so that was an interview that I had. So there's this tool called HireVue. So I'm surprised that that this is becoming common, where
companies are using AI to do their interviews, their job interviews.
Yeah, so I received a prompt, and so I open up the link, and it's a Zoom room like this, but I see the question on the screen, and then you click a button, and then you basically make a video of yourself talking into it, but you can't see the video.
Wow. And then I guess the company takes it and maybe they use AI to like process it too, you think, or like to make sure you said the right words or the right themes or anything like that?
Yeah, so I understand like making a video of yourself like for a job, but it was interesting to have like this framed as like, this is a real interview. And by the way, we're gonna tell you that an AI is gonna watch it.
Wow, did you get that job?
No, this isn't my current position, but it was an interview that I had to do last year.
That's so interesting. Wow. Yeah. Wow. The advancements of AI in every facet of our life is a little bit, I don't know if scary is the right word. Yeah, that's so interesting. Was there anything else that y'all talked about in that group, Omer, Sabrina, or Jason?
Yeah, we also talked about how increasingly like even everyday things like cars can become platforms for tech, which is all the more important why we should learn technical skills and have a say in how these things are being constructed.
Yeah, definitely. No, that it again a little bit scary. Maybe I'm too old school, but I feel like there's the cool part of it, but then there's the like, at what point do we become basically like computers ourselves? You know, Omer, I heard when I was in there, the chips that are starting, you know, not that the vaccine, but other things that might be inserted into our bodies to make our bodies become computers. Interesting, cool, okay. So every group had a very different kind of conversation. Frances, what about your group? Anything that came up of interest?
Yeah, I think we talked about kind of why Google and all these other kind of big tech companies or like FANG companies are seen sort of in a negative light, and had an interesting discussion about that. And also just preparing for the job search and some kind of tips there.
Great. Well, just to wrap up today, I just want to thank all the speakers again, and maybe just wrapping up, we could have each of you share. We always do this kind of like words of wisdom or things I wish I knew when I was in college, things I wish I knew now that, you know, could tell my younger self. So any like final, maybe not necessarily advice, but just like things you wish you knew when you were the kind of stage that a lot of these students are in. Anybody want to start?
I would have so much to tell my younger self during that time of my life. I'll just start with that. But if I have to pick one sentence, it's that I'm just gonna say like you can build skills and you do belong.
Oh, that's nice. So Frances or Marilenis?
I think for me will be like nothing is permanent, and you do need to keep learning as you go, as you grow, because the industry is it changes rapidly. I myself am learning Android right now. I didn't see myself learning Android 3 years ago. I learned Python 5 years ago, then 7 years ago, I learned CSS, JavaScript, and HTML. Then I learned Python. Then I learned data analytics and metrics and all the tools. And now I'm learning Android. So it's never going to be the same. unless you go into management and then become a people management where, then you need to learn about that. But you need to be flexible enough to accept that it is a continuous challenge. It's not like you say, if you're a doctor, maybe you just see patients all day and you don't need to learn anything new. But in these areas, it's different.
Yeah. I would even say probably doctors are having to learn new stuff related to technology because that's entering that field as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The AI doctors.
Right. Or like using virtual reality and things like that. That's going into surgery rooms, which is so fascinating. Yeah, there's a lot there. Great, thank you. And Frances, what about you? Any thoughts to tell your younger self?
Yeah, I would say like the most valuable thing probably would be, well, I guess a couple things. Like if I had to go back and tell my younger self, like, hey, Frances, going in, be sure to do this more. Probably just early on, be better about marketing myself. So keeping a record of all my projects, everything I've done, whether it's related to work, studies, or just projects outside of that and personal initiatives and interests. That kind of defines who you are, the things you're interested in outside of work and study, and can add a really interesting aspect to your overall narrative that you're branding to an possible employer. And then another thing is not settling. So it is really easy to like settle for a job. And I think it is okay to do that, especially if you are in a position where you really need to support your family or have other obligations that, you just can't ignore. But I would say like, if after 6 months you can't find a role that you really love and you're job searching, that's the time where you have to like, okay, I think it's time to settle. But I think before that, like, try not to settle for like any job that you find. Try to find a really good one that fits your interest, pays you well, make sure to negotiate, for your salary, because it's really hard to get 10K extra over the years instead of just switching jobs later. So you might as well just ask for it earlier. There's just like a lot of little things like that. So I think like the two things I would say, be better about marketing yourself, and then don't settle unless you really, really have to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Definitely more on the like job negotiations and all of those kinds of things that we can talk more with the group about next year. Maybe to wrap up too, then the students, if you all can go around and just share like one thing you take away from everything you've heard today. There's been a lot that's come out, maybe just one thing that sticks in your mind or one thing that you want to think about more. So we'll start with Anna. Do you mind going first?
I think one thing that stuck in my mind was that CS, you never, like what Marlene said, that you never stop learning in CS, that you have to be learning continuously. So yeah, that's something.
Yep. Both exciting and also maybe a little scary. Yeah.
Right.
Thanks, Anna. China, can you go next?
For me, one key takeaway would be like the focus on breaking the stigma, not to let discrimination deter you from going for a job that you would like to apply for.
Yep. Drake, what about you?
So one thing that would stick with me when we're talking in the other room is when we're learning right now, we may not understand, but in the future we keep pursuing kind of, then we will find out how it we'll better understand it essentially.
Yeah, what you're learning in class is so separate from the working world. Sometimes it can feel like, what am I learning this for? But yeah, hopefully it will come into use. Yeah. Sabrina, can you go next?
Yeah. I guess one takeaway that I got from this meeting was I guess I'm less worried about like the mix of my identities because I have a lot of identities that kind of came up in these discussions today. And I guess I was worried about them getting in the way of tech, and I guess I'm not too worried about that now.
Cool, great. That's good to hear. Thank you. Omer, can you go next? One thing you learned from today?
Actually, I don't know what can I say about it, but we are speaking about the technology, what we can do with the features. I had a different idea about it after the speaking. Yes. I don't know what can I say about it. Yeah, like that. I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. You can keep thinking about it. Thanks, Omer.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. And Lily?
I think I'm still kind of stuck on that AI as a interview thing, and it really made me think about how like how scary that is, but you can research or prepare either mentally or with more research, and it really doesn't mean you're going to know what you're going to walk into. So knowing but not knowing, and how scary that is overall, but to just sort of power through either way.
Yeah, and hopefully you're getting more exposure now. Like, who knew that there's such a thing like that? And if you come across it now, you'll be like, oh yeah, I remember hearing about that when we had that panel.
Yeah, maybe it'll be a little less scary if that happens.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, just want to thank the speakers so much. Everybody put up some reactions or a note in the chat box to thank Marilenis, Francis, and Jason for coming today. Just very appreciative of your time with us, knowing everybody's busy, and thank you for making some time for us.